Hi, I'm Debbie Millman of Design Matters, and you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm George Smart. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week. Modernism Week is a dazzling, incredible spectacle of exhibits, martinis, lectures, art, tours. In fact, they estimate that the economic impact of Modernism Week on the local economy was $2.2 zillion. It's pretty incredible.
Sure that wasn't just a jillion, George?
No, I think it was a zillion dollars.
Okay, we'll go with it.
If you're into mid-century modern, this is the Woodstock of all the architecture we love, an event not to be missed. And we were there at Modernism Week talking with nearly all the keynote speakers, authors, and special guests.
I'm Tom Gould. I came along with George for part of the trip and got to go to the Western White House, Sunnyland.
Oh, yeah.
Which was, who was that? The Walter Annenberg built it?
Yes.
25,000 square feet, and it can be locked down for presidential visits.
A secure facility.
Yeah, it's Reagan and Nixon and Obama were all there. But I still got to steal an ashtray.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I'm sure no one will be coming after you now, Tom.
Yet.
Support for U.S. Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll, your special real estate agent for bringing modernist design expertise to buyers and sellers. Reach Angela at angelaroll.com. That's ROEHL or 919-995-0550.
The photographers documenting the mid-century movement provide us a wealth of information, perspective, and enjoyment, capturing not only amazing houses, but the lives and careers of their owners and the architects. From poolside at the swanky Hotel Skylark, which is going to be soon the official name of the hotel, you'll meet authors Emily Bills and Pierluigi Serraino talking about one largely undiscovered modernist photographer, Marvin Rand. Their new book, along with Sam Lubell, California Captured, puts Marvin Rand front and center in the same world class as Julius Shulman and Ezra Stoller. Later, we'll join photographer Andrew Pielage about his quest to shoot every Frank Lloyd building in the world.
With his camera.
Yes.
So you may have heard the name of Julius Shulman before, or maybe Ezra Stoller, or maybe Joseph Molitor. There are quite a few that have been in the architectural photography section of my brain. But a name I had not heard until recently is Marvin Rand. And our guest today just did a talk about Marvin Rand. And I'm really anxious to hear all about this fellow and why you guys like him so much. So, Emily, why don't you start?
We were excited to find Marvin ourselves. I think we all came to him through different ways. I came to him through studying Esther McCoy, and she was his mentor, and he was her main photographer for a lot of projects that she did after working with Julius. And we discovered Vicki Rand, who is his daughter, who had been taking care of an archive and had it hidden away, so to speak, but really was caretaking it in a nondescript building in West Los Angeles. And it is...
Was it like in a storage warehouse someplace?
It's one of the, when you have a business and you just need to rent a room to have your business. Exactly. But it's like a closet in that building.
Okay.
Yes. But within this closet were these wonderful storage containers, and, each one had a shelf that you could pull out and had altogether about 50,000 negatives and transparencies and slides and prints of basically the history of modernism in Los Angeles is seen through the lens of Marvin Rand. And so we are absolutely transfixed by this and knew immediately that this story had to be told.
When did you first learn about Marvin Rand? When was it?
I learned about him in the early aughts when I was working on the Esther McCoy archive at the Smithsonian, the Archives of American Art. And then Sam approached me a little bit later saying, there's this archive, let's do this book. And then Pierluigi found his way to us as well. So we've been working on it a long time. I was joking with Sam that he said, when did we start this? And I said, well, my daughter's 5 and I was pregnant, so 6 or 7 years we've been working on it. Yeah.
Pierluigi, how did you come across Marvin Rand? Was it through Emily, or did you know him already?
Well, I was aware of the work of Marvin Rand primarily through the images of Craig Elwood. I met Marvin Rand at the LACMA maybe in 2002 for just a few minutes. At that time, I had just published Modernism Rediscovered. There was quite a bit of territoriality on the work of Julius Shulman.
A fantastic book you should all go out and buy. One of my favorites.
And which is approaching 20 years now.
20, really?
Yes. So it's been a big chapter of my life. And
the sequel is going to be rediscovering the rediscovery of modernism.
Well, it certainly helped lift in the interest of modernism. There's no doubt. Which was already underway. We didn't create it. But what I found was that at the time, Marvin Rand, quite an energetic personality, short in stature, and I knew of his work through the negatives of Craig Elwood. And I also remember that his pictures were in the famous book of Rainer Banham, Los Angeles Architecture for Ecologies. But my interest in the Rand archive specifically was prompted as I was working on another project on the history of California modernism with Alan Hess, seeking the less tapped photographic sources.
Yeah.
And at the time, Vicki Rand used to live in Sacramento, and I live in the Bay Area, and someone from SACMA, the Sacramento Modern, knew her, and I was put in touch with her and said, it would be interesting looking at the archive. And she said, well, Sam and Emily are looking at the archive. Well, I know Sam and Emily very well, so let's try to connect. And I said, if you guys are doing a book, don't worry, I'm just going to step back. But they were very gracious. They welcomed me in. And we sort of combined our knowledge because
so it's like a Marvel superhero movie where the various characters pull together to accomplish the project.
Welcome to the canon.
Yeah.
Well, the challenge of a project like this is that the archive can be overwhelming, and at some point you don't know where to start and how do you select what are the criteria. So one thing that we did was to essentially present the project in a research paper in London at the RIBA, and we invited the folks from Phaidon. So
the publisher,
correct. So Emily and I went to London. I presented a paper on something else where we sort of orchestrated this, and then the Phaidon folks came out and they looked at the archive and they were very interested, and we got this thing going. And once you have the publisher, then the publisher sets a trajectory for the archive, because the archive is very diverse. There are so many stories within the archive. So the Marvin Rand archive is very rich in historical adventures that are very different from each other. So we have California Capture that tells the mid-century modern story of the archive, which was what the publisher wanted. But we, as a group, got a full understanding of what's in the archive, which is really remarkable. It speaks greatly to the talent of Marvin Rand, his commitment to architecture, all the trends that were taking place in Southern California, and the history of taste, if you will, how things more from the 50s to 2009 when he passed away.
Emily, it's been mentioned he worked with Craig Elwood quite a bit.
Correct, yes. Yeah, I think at the time he was doing commercial photography. He was photographing, products for advertisements, and he had partnered with Louis Danziger doing graphic design for firms like General Lighting and Gruen Lighting. And together they had put together a design group, which was like a salon in Los Angeles, and invited very smartly all the sort of movers and shakers in what at that time was just architecture, now is mid-century architecture, to come to their design salon. And this is how these sort of young graduates wanted to meet the rest of the people in Los Angeles. And he meets Esther McCoy this way, and she basically tells him, you will be an architectural photographer now. And he says, okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, as you do to Esther McCoy when she tells you that. But it was absolutely the right fit for him. He was already engaged with that world a little bit, and she brings him in, and he starts to meet the arts and architecture folks, John Intenza and the Eameses. And through this, he and Craig Elwood become acquainted with each other. And I think that his way of photographing really spoke to Elwood. They both have a graphic sensibility. Marvin had a real appreciation for the structure of a building, not just sort of the lifestyle that takes place in that building, but how a building is put together, how the pieces are put together, what it looks like graphically, the sort of approach to post and beam that Elwood was very much embraced, this idea of transparency, and he was able to represent that in his photographs. So pretty much right out of the gate, he starts photographing for Elwood as soon as he starts working with Esther. And he photographs for Arts and Architecture magazine, the 1953 case study house, Craig Elwood's case study house.
Was that his first of the three?
Case study house 1916 was the first one.
Right, number 16.
Number 16.
This is the first one that he photographs extensively.
Okay.
And it lands about 12 pages, 35 photographs in arts and architecture, so it's a huge spread.
Huge.
Yes, absolutely. And this puts Marvin on the map because that project is published internationally. And then he goes on to photograph the Smith House and the Hunt House, and eventually becomes associated with Killingsworth, Brady, and Smith,
Okay.
Who also is represented extensively through arts and architecture. And Rand's photographs are all in arts and architecture as a result. So these two firms, I think, were real sort of bread and butter clients for Marvin.
Arts and Architecture magazine has been gone now for 30-some years. It had a brief revival, I think, in the late 70s, early 80s. So, Pierluigi, tell our audience how important this magazine was during its time. And it was certainly very different. It didn't have a lot of ads in it, but they were very small and towards the back. It's not like picking up one of the magazines today that covers architecture.
Yeah, the magazine Arts and Architecture, as we know it today, was a transformation of a previous magazine called California Arts and Architecture. And the transition from California Arts and Architecture to Arts and Architecture was a signal that the magazine had a worldly ambition, did not want to be a regional journal of any kind, but it had an intellectual flavor that John Intenza, the publisher, managing editor who financed the enterprise, who had been hired as it was California Architecture, wanted to fundamentally raise as a profile. Los Angeles was really not known early on as a place for particular experimentation. It was always the Europeans, but in fact Arts and Architecture puts the California in the world map. Even in its small circulation, it wasn't a widely published magazine. At the same time, the content was so rich, it fostered the careers of Charles Eames, of many of the names that are famous now, but also of others that are fallen off the radar. And then the magazine had a transition in 1962 when John Intenza takes over the post of the Ground Foundation, and David Travers takes leadership of Arts and Architecture. And there's a new phase of the magazine brief for about 4 years where it continues and then it stops. And in fact, the first book that Esther McCoy does on Arts and Architecture and the Case Study House is actually from 1945 to 1962, which is the era of Intenza. And Rand contributed in significant ways to this particular iconography. I need to point out that there was a particular image from the Johnson house, a house that Craig Elwood did, which I believe Marvin took in 1956, that precedes the famous Case Study House 22 of Julius Shulman. And it's a corner of the house looking toward Los Angeles without the girls, but it has that kind of arresting quality.
This is the Stoll House in Los Angeles?
The Stoll House in Los Angeles.
Pierre
Koenig.
Yep.
The very famous image was taken in 1960. This was taken a few years prior. So it's clear that Marvin Rand had its own clear vision of what architecture was about in relation to the frame, and he stayed true to that. So we know Elwood primarily through the filter of Marvin Rand. And it's always telling when you see a building that's being photographed by multiple photographers, how certain characteristics of the buildings come out more promptly than others.
Emily, after Craig Elwood, what other architects and projects did Rand work with?
One of his big clients was Welton Becket and Associates, and Marvin knew the Becketts. He knew the sort of the founder of the whole Becket firm and worked with them. And he was their main photographer. They didn't work with anyone else in Los Angeles. When they had projects in other parts of the country, they did have photographers there. But Marvin was their primary photographer in L.A.
I assume he would have shot things like the building at LAX that Welton did. Wouldn't Welton Becket do that
Pereira.
one? Yeah, was that
Luckman
Pereira?
and Pereira. Absolutely. It's one of his most fantastic photographs, and it's one of our favorites also. And it's interesting, Pierluigi was talking a little bit about Shulman photographing a building in one way. And he also has a photograph of this building, and he crops it very close. Marvin pulls away from the building, and he allows the foreground, the lines of the parking spots, to be part of the graphic sensibility of the photograph itself. And there's something about Marvin's photographs that it helps you to understand LA as an Angelino. When you see that building at LAX, it is part of an entire environment of cars and traffic and things like this. And for me, his photograph of that building speaks to me as an Angelino. He does the same with a lot of his other images, where he doesn't necessarily photograph a dramatic sky behind a building. He lets LA sky be what it is, which is sometimes just that June gloom. If you're an Angelino, you know that throughout June there's this sort of gray haze. And
that isn't pollution?
Is it slightly yellow? Then ding ding.
It kind of rolls in off the ocean, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's the June gloom, and then there's the smog, right? No, this is the June gloom, and it's just sort of an opaque kind of sky. And so instead of putting in the drama, he photographs the city as it is. And there's sort of a real love for his environment and understanding of his environment that I see in his work.
Well, to be working in the 50s with Elwood means he had to have been born in, late 20s, early 30s? Somewhere around there?
Marvin Rand?
Yeah.
1924.
Yeah.
He was born in 1924.
So what about his career into the 80s and 90s and beyond?
Yeah, well, he kept photographing. He's an interesting photographer in that way in Los Angeles because he's a real transitional figure. I think that what I was saying about his love for Los Angeles is not just a love for mid-century architecture, which is, of course, where he really got his start as a photographer, and there's a real dedication to that period of design. But he's interested in Los Angeles as a transforming animal, in a sense. And along with that comes not only the architecture that came before mid-century, but the architecture that comes afterwards. So when you start to have this period in which postmodernism is starting to evolve and come forward, and other photographers don't quite know what to do with that, or in fact maybe flat out reject those new experiments in design, Marvin's curious. So he starts to become interested in people like Frank Gehry, in early Morphosis, in Eric Owen Moss's work, and he photographs those buildings. And a lot of those architects who had learned from people like Elwood and the figures that came before and respected that work, but were taking new approaches, right? They were experimenting and trying different things with materials, thinking more about the day-to-day life of the streetscape and what that looks like in LA. Marvin wanted to know what that was and how to photograph it. And so he transforms along with the LA architecture scene and begins producing work there. And he photographs all the way until the end of his life. So more contemporary figures he's photographing as well. He also experiments with digital photography. So for most of his career, he's using a 4x5, but he's not afraid to start experimenting with digital cameras and even taking his hand at Photoshop, which I don't think he ever quite succeeded at in any kind of remarkable way. But the fact that, he's in his 80s and experimenting with Photoshop was pretty remarkable.
Pierluigi, did he experiment at all with video?
I am unaware of that.
Okay.
I would argue that he did remain within the confine of the photographic frame. But to echo what Emily was saying, This is an individual who has seen a transition from the certainty of modernity to a crisis of modernity, to full rejection of modernity, to the rise of modernity under new circumstances. And he's really
those
the bridge.
Pounding noises you hear are Pierluigi's hand going across the table for emphasis. We've tried to stop him from doing this, but
I'm passionate about the subject. I guess that's what it is. I would like to point out something about the quote-unquote casualties of this archive. For example, there is a very important practice called Ladd and Kelsey, Thornton Ladd and John Kelsey, that were the design architect of the Department of Water and Power in Los Angeles. Were not case study house program architects, but they were highly revered. We could not find any of their work except one job, although there were a lot of jobs that Marvin Rand photographed. Really groundbreaking designs. When you speak with the survivors of that era, they speak with reverence, especially about Thornton Ladd. So there are other cases like this of the Rand archive. So while the ledger tells us all the jobs that he did, we also know what's missing. And we don't know why it's missing, right? The negatives, maybe they were given to the editors and were never returned or what have you. But we do have a fundamental X-ray of what was going on in Los Angeles at its golden age, its crisis, and its resurfacing. So in this respect, the outreach of the Rand Archive is even more informative than other archives. That are very.
Do you hope to maybe uncover these negatives and prints that are missing in the future? Or?
Well, we looked at them for them in the archive. They're not there, but some of them are in the archives of architects whose archives have been lost as well, or they're in archives of architecture writers of the time. So I found some of the prints of Marvin Rand that I'm not seen in the book in the archive of Elizabeth Kendall Thompson, who was the Esther McCoy of the Bay Area. If someone were to find the archive of Irving Myers, who was one of the first publicists of architecture in the 1950s in Los Angeles, most likely they would find many of these images. So it's spread. It's somewhere. I am not so sure it's completely lost. Because
clearly you need more Avengers on your team to go searching for these.
Totally.
Right?
We're hiring.
Yeah, you're hiring.
This is a call out.
Well, last question. Are there plans to put what's in this storage warehouse into some climate-controlled university at some point, or is it going to stay there? What's going to happen?
Well, it's a question that's still out there. There are a lot of people who are very much in love with this archive who have been taking care of it on behalf of Vicki Rand. She, at first, of course, was taking care of it, and it is still in her hands, in the family hands, and it has moved once or twice, and it has a couple other people who are overseeing it here and there.
Okay.
We are still waiting for a good home for it, a place where it can really be seen by people who are researching both architectural photography and the incredible amount of architects that are represented within the archive.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. The book is California Captured, Marvin Rand Mid-Century Modern Architecture, available at your favorite bookstore or online vendor.
Thank you.
Our pleasure to be here.
It's been great. Thank you.
Stay tuned. After a quick vodka martini, stirred, not shaken, we join George poolside at the glamorous Hotel Skylark with photographer Andrew Pielage. His goal is to shoot all of Frank Lloyd Wright's buildings. By the way, the dump trucks you will sometimes hear in the background, they're hauling away debris from a freak Palm Springs rainstorm, the biggest one-day storm since the 1940s. But it was still a sunny day for Modernism Week. George and Andrew are coming up next.
So you visit your first Frank Lloyd Wright house, and you're in awe. Like, who was this guy? And you're looking up online the buildings that he did, the houses. You want to go see more. You try to convince your spouse or partner or significant other, like, hey, how hard could it be to go see the rest of his work? I mean, how many things could he possibly have done? And you found out he did a lot of projects, residential projects, commercial projects, places of worship, libraries, convention centers, you name it. And it's a daunting task to make this epic journey around the country and the world. But Andrew here has taken it upon himself to make this kind of epic journey with his camera. He is an architectural photographer who is going to be shooting these houses, right? Is it just houses?
All of his works.
All of his works,
Yep.
Okay. And last I read your tote board, I think you were at 52?
We're up to 60 now.
60 now?
60.
Okay.
Yep.
So the tote board is somewhat accurate.
Yes, I try to keep that as updated as I can.
His scoreboard of you around the country.
Right.
So what was your first one? What was number one for you?
It was Taliesin West.
Okay.
So, and that's in my hometown. So I'm based out of Phoenix, Arizona. So, and that was my first Wright site, not just photographing, but visiting was also Taliesin West. And I just fell in love with that place up there. I mean, I grew up in the desert, in the outdoors with my family. And Frank Lloyd Wright does such a great job up there with blending the desert with the architecture. He's got his famous desert masonry walls where it really looks like he just uprooted the desert floor and brought them up to make a wall. And that really, for me, is what got me into Frank Lloyd Wright, was that blending. I mean, it's hard to tell sometimes where his architecture stops and the desert begins, and vice versa. And so growing up in the outdoors in Phoenix with my family, up there reminded me of all those trips that I had with my parents, visiting beautiful desert landscapes in Arizona.
Mm-hmm. And Wright has a number of buildings in Phoenix.
Correct. Yeah.
Houses, right?
He has houses. Yeah, he has Gamage, which is a big theater.
Okay.
Yeah. Biltmore, I guess, if you want to consider that a Wright, Frank Lloyd Wright.
Wright-ish, maybe?
Wright-ish. Yeah. So obviously that one's there as well.
They try to claim lineage.
They
It's
do.
like a lot of
They
these
do.
cleverly written ads by realtors where they go, Frank Lloyd Wright inspired home.
Right. And it has one rock in a wall or something. And
Yeah,
it
one
gets
block
inspired.
is, what was the name of his red color?
Taliesin Red.
Taliesin red?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
You went to Taliesin, but a lot of tourists go to Taliesin.
Yeah.
But you decided to make a mission out of this. At what point did you start that mission?
Like I said, I went up there for the tour, and I couldn't take photos. So, and this is how I got involved with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation in the very, very beginning. I couldn't take photographs on the tour. So, I was really actually pretty upset about that.
Not because you weren't skilled, but because they didn't allow that.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. Yeah, on the tours. And I think that's changed now, but, this was 2011 when I was
It'd be a
up there.
better story if you were completely unskilled and then went back home, taught yourself photography,
Well,
and then came back.
Self-taught, but so they wouldn't let me take photos. So I ended up having a couple beers with my friend that night, and she was a nurse at the doctor's office where Dr. Joe came in for visits, and Dr. Joe was Frank Lloyd Wright's personal physician.
Oh.
So she said, let me see what I can do. I'll talk with him next time he's in and see if I can get you up to Taliesin West. And so the story goes, she ended up connecting them. I went and talked to them and told them, how much I enjoy Taliesin West. And really, it was a lot of begging on the phone.
And what year was this?
2011.
Okay.
And so they gave me one opportunity to shoot one sunset photo up there. And I knew the significance of what that meant, because you can't go up there, especially at the time you couldn't take photos, even as a tourist, and let alone a professional or amateur about to be a professional photographer going up there and taking photos also. So I knew what a huge opportunity it was. And it's kind of a funny story because I ended up taking the photo. I thought it was great. My mom thought it was great. That was the extent of my following at the time, was my family, my mom and myself. So they ended up liking the photo and asked me if I had ever taught photography before. And I was like, of course I've taught photography, but in reality, I had never, ever taught photography before. It was one of those...
Note to staff, check resume first.
That's exactly. It was one of those fake it till you make it moments. But I knew that was my opportunity to get in. And so, I took advantage of it. I said yes. And they said, well, our photography instructors just left. Are you interested in trying out and being an instructor up here? And I said, of course. And now I teach photography workshops for both kids and adults at Taliesin West, Taliesin, and Falling Water.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So you have made it to Falling Water now.
Yes. Yeah, I had the wonderful opportunity they asked me to be an artist in residence at
cool.
Falling Water. So I spent 30 days split up between 1 week and 3 weeks.
So did you get to live in the garage?
No, they own a couple buildings on kind of the grounds, and they allowed me to stay there.
Is that like where the camp counselors stay in the summer in the backwoods someplace?
Oh, yeah, it's definitely backwoods. If you've been to Falling Water, it's definitely backwoods there.
They probably didn't want to put you up in the Days Inn down the road. That's too upscale.
Yeah, and I think it's probably 4 hours away, too.
While you were out there, I assume you went to Kentuck Knob?
Went to Kentuck Knob as well.
And did you get to photograph that?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the weather really didn't work out for me shooting exterior. So I only had a limited time there, so I will be going back in September. I'm going back to Falling Water, and we'll shoot the exterior. But I did get to shoot the interior of Kentuck Knob.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a beautiful property.
Really is. Kentuck Knob is a completely different experience than Falling Water. Falling Water is very grand and amazing and miraculous, and Kentuck Knob is much more intimate.
Right. And we talk about those, desert masonry walls at Taliesin West. Kentuck Knob has that almost front of the ship with all that stacked, I think it's maybe limestone, like native limestone there. That's just, it's incredible to stand at the base and look up at that.
And the Sculpture Garden, Kentuck Knob, it's also
incredible.
They have renovated a lot of that over the last few years.
Yeah.
Because it's out in the open and it gets weather damage.
Right.
Particularly the very, very large installations.
Yeah.
Did you get to go to Polymath Park?
I have not been there.
Okay.
But that is on the agenda for
the fall?
For September.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're actually doing a new concept of workshops that I actually haven't talked about yet, but we are combining 3 different Wright sites in one weekend. So right now I do beginner and intermediate workshops just at Falling Water, which is
fantastic enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I shouldn't undermine that, but which is a wonderful experience.
Only the most famous house in North America, really.
Yeah, you're going to have to edit that out. So now we're combining the 3. So we'll do Polymath Park, Kentuck Knob, and Falling Water all in one weekend. Which
when we take groups up, we do that same series as well. And we stay in the very stately Holiday Inn Express in McConnellsville. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Nice. Yeah.
It's the Michelin 4-star of the area. I really enjoy sending our group to Polymath Park because the couple there who you'll meet are really great serial collectors of houses. They have adopted a couple of houses that were already there, that were by students of Wright. And then they're in the process of trying to move as many houses by not just Wright's houses, but different architects that are being abandoned or in danger of being torn down to that property.
Yeah.
It's just amazing, an effort.
Yeah, and I've heard a little bit about that process, and it's just phenomenal what they do. I mean, they basically board up the entire house into shipping containers and then figure out instructions on how they take it down and then put it back together and then bring it to the site and do it by hand.
Yeah, with no manual.
Yeah, exactly. They're making their own manual doing it, yeah.
I mean, I can't put my remote control back together. Sometimes when I drop it and it shatters into a zillion pieces.
Right.
And they're putting together a whole house.
That damn IKEA furniture.
Yeah.
You can never figure that out.
A whole house that was built 60, 70, 90 years ago.
Right.
Holy cow.
Right.
People who are on these tours and want to take better photos, what's some basic advice you can give them so they don't look too wonky when they're trying to capture these memories for themselves or their family?
Right. First advice is to look at the site and see if they offer a photography tour. Going back to Falling Water, they have an insight tour. They have a tour that you can actually take photos on, and you're allowed to, and they allow time to do that.
Okay.
Because most often you're in a tour group, you're trying to stay either in the front or the back, and now you're looking through a camera lens. It's difficult to try to take in the tour and photograph. So that's always my first suggestion, is to look on the site and sign up for that photography tour.
Okay.
I tell my students, when they come to these workshops that, we're not photographing architecture, we're photographing the light. And so my advice, number 2, would be to book an early tour. So either a sunrise or closest to that, or a sunset. The earlier and late sun in the day will make your images a little bit better.
Okay.
As far as flattering light.
Are there sunrise tours of anything? I don't think I've ever seen those.
I don't know if Falling Water opens one, so maybe it's, getting the first tour of the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that some of our guests on the podcast have confessed to sneaking onto properties at 7 in the morning to, quote, capture the light.
Right.
Which we do not recommend.
Right, and I have never done that.
Yeah, that's good. We don't want to see you on CNN. Architecture photographer arrested at 6:30 a.m. crawling into Wright structure.
Most wanted.
Yes.
But light really is the most important thing.
Okay.
One of the kind of rules for my photography project is that I'm not introducing light into the Wright sites. Wright does such an amazing job of capturing the light, bouncing it around his designs, both interior and exterior. His shadow play at Taliesin West. The David Wright House has beautiful shadow play as well. It's just amazing. And so early on, I recognized that. And I said, who am I to bring in artificial light and create a shadow or illuminate something that Wright didn't want necessarily to be illuminated?
So, footnote to Andrew's future clients, if he brings in a light setup, your work is not shit. Just so you know, people. Just want to get you off the hook there, Andrew. What about the travel part of this? What cities has this taken you to besides Pennsylvania and Phoenix?
Yeah, a lot in Wisconsin, too.
Okay.
So
that's loaded with houses.
Absolutely, yeah. And I got commissioned with Travel Wisconsin over the summer to shoot the Wright Trail.
Okay.
So this is a nationally designated highway that connects Wright sites all through Wisconsin. So I believe there's 11 in there. So they commissioned me, and I spent a couple days riding that trail, and they got me access into all of those sites.
Oh, that's great.
To take photos for them for their promotion of the Wright Trail.
And I assume you got down into Racine, too?
Yep.
With the
SC
Johnsons.
Johnson,
Yeah, the Johnson, Wing Spread, all those. Those are great places to visit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, SC Johnson Wax, that great workroom, is some of the most beautiful light that I've ever seen in a Wright site.
And they built a visitor center not too long ago. I don't recall the name of the architect right offhand, but it's a kind of underground approach.
Yeah.
All these museums over the last 20 years, maybe longer, since I.M. Pei built the glass pyramid in Paris and then put all the visitors' quarters underneath that pyramid.
Yeah.
All the museums in the world have been going underground to not obstruct the view from the top.
Right.
And also clear out some of that building space to put real art and not the bathrooms and the ticket stands.
Right. And yeah, that is a beautiful museum or visitor center. And there's actually some great shots through that glass onto the research tower as well, which I've taken. So
there's a giant airplane, I remember.
There is, yeah.
That's in that new hall.
Right. I don't remember the significance of that. Do you?
I think, Johnson Wax, obviously they were not poor. They had a lot of money.
Yeah.
And he was an adventurer. He would fly this, I guess it was a biplane.
Yeah.
Right?
Pretty sure.
He would fly this biplane to South America, Indiana Jones style.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that.
They had pictures of him, wearing the leather. I don't think he had a whip. But they had pictures of him in the leather and the flying goggles and all that. It's pretty interesting side story.
Right.
To all that.
Yeah. And you can't forget the Kringle there in Racine, Wisconsin either.
Yeah.
I had my first Kringle last summer.
Okay.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
I met up with Hertzberg. He's another photographer, Frank Lloyd Wright photographer out there. And I had no idea how big they were. And I told him to buy me two because they come in all different flavors. And I wanted apple and cherry. He's like, you sure you want two? And I said, yeah, because I was figuring they were
how
like
big can they be?
Size. Yeah. And they're massive. They're like 2 feet long by a foot wide. I had to end up giving one of them away. I could only eat half of the first one.
Yeah.
But another not miss in Racine, Wisconsin.
Well, that's one thing you can always count on in the Midwest is cake and dough products.
That's true.
I remember one time I traveled to Traverse City, Michigan, which is cherry country, particularly like cherry pies. And, it was like being on crack. I mean, I could not stop eating the cherry pie.
Yeah.
After a while, your blood sugar goes, please stop.
You just crash. You're done.
Now, where are you on to next after here in Palm Springs?
Yeah, so I have a lecture here on Wednesday talking about what we're talking about here. And then I do a beginner workshop Thursday and Friday of this week.
Okay.
Yeah, then I'm back in Phoenix for a little bit, and we're doing a Modernism week in Phoenix, too.
Right, Allison King.
Yep,
She's been a guest on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. She's great, and she's done a great job of organizing that event every year. This is the first year I've been involved with it. So that will be happening in March. I'll be doing workshops as well there.
Okay.
And we'll be seeing Taliesin West will be the home base for that workshop, and we get to see the Lights House and First Christian Church.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which
beautiful building.
Yeah, it is. I love both of those properties. So.
They're so accommodating at the church.
They are.
They really are very sweet about these, lunatic architecture fans that come knocking on the door.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I definitely agree with you. Sandy over there has been absolutely amazing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's going to open the doors for us for the workshop. So, yeah, we have another big right site up on the scale of falling waters, the Guggenheim.
Okay.
So I've got the green light to shoot the Guggenheim. We are now working on kind of timing for that. It's their 60th anniversary this year, so we're trying to tie in my project with the 60th anniversary.
So I assume they'll probably let you in at 6 in the morning,
right,
to get the early light. Streaming in right from the cone up in the top, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's an interesting design and interesting light, because if you get the light too early, it's not going to be shining through that dome because it's going to be too low in the sky.
Okay.
So, we kind of talked about getting in really all day. So I would go in, an hour or two before the general public's allowed, because I want to take the space with no one in it. But then I think part of, activation and the human element is to have humans in the photos. And so I think it's going to be great to continue to shoot as people are letting in and going. I guess they go down.
Well, not that I'm recommending this, Guggenheim, but I always wonder if someone is ever tempted to bring a little marble with them and let it go at the top.
Right.
And let it skitter its way round and round and round down to the bottom. Because I'm always thinking of the Guggenheim when I see those little candy machines at airports and things, or for charities where you put in a coin and it goes through this long journey on its swirling way down to the bottom.
Right. I'm going to let you bring that up to him.
Okay. I'm sure the curators will be really receptive.
There's no priceless art in that place.
Yeah.
Just roll some marbles around.
No liability issues with marbles and tourists, right? Couldn't possibly be forbidden. I think I'll call them right now. Now, when you do your beginners class here in Palm Springs, is it just a classroom thing, or are you going to take them somewhere?
Oh, we definitely take them somewhere.
Where are you going to go?
Yeah. So we got into Elrod's house.
Yep.
The famous interior designer, which I am super excited about seeing. I mean, I went and scouted it a month ago with Mark from Modernism Week, and the place is immaculate. I mean, it hasn't changed in 60 plus years.
Yeah.
Even down to ashtrays. So it was amazing in there. I'm really excited to show the students that as well.
Okay.
And then we will be also photographing the Grace Miller house as well.
Right.
Which I didn't get a chance to go in and see the interior, which I'm really excited about doing too. But I've done some research on that. I've seen Shulman, Julius Shulman took some photos of that they actually used to restore it. It looks amazing. Yeah.
And that's going to be a B&B soon, an Airbnb.
Airbnb.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the main house will not be open, but there's a little guest house behind it that people will be able to stay, and there's a beautiful pool. I think by the time this comes out, that will be underway.
Right.
That's so cool. You're going to have a great time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they put in a lot of hours in these workshops. This is not, you come to work and to learn and to have fun. So we're there sunrise to sunset.
Okay.
And we're shooting during the good parts of that light. And so they will learn, this is the beginner course, so they will learn shutter speed, aperture, and ISO, which are the big three to kind of take control of your camera. And then we go on practice, because I'm not a big classroom guy, but it has to be taught that way. Mm-hmm. But I'm more hands-on. That's how I learned. I have no formal training in photography, so it was going out there, making a lot of mistakes, and just making it happen and learning from those.
I thought you were an esteemed, experienced instructor. That's what the people at Taliesin West told me.
Right. They thought so, too.
Well, thanks so much for dropping by. It's really been fun talking to you.
It's been great talking with you as well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening. Want to hang out with U.S. Modernist at Modernism Week in February next year? Send an email to george@usmodernist.org with your name and phone number. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll. your special agent for Modernist houses. 919-995-0550. Okay, take us out, Tom.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 7,000 significant Modernist houses, and access 2.5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, researches guests from her secret underground lair. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guild. George and I'll be back soon with another Modernism Week edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.